The Avatars by George William Russell, also known as A.E., 1933, read by Josh Mitteldorf. The Avatars Introduction. There is no imagination of mine about avatars in this book. No more than an artist could paint the sun at noon could I imagine so great beings. But as a painter may suggest the light on hill or wood, so in this fantasy I try to imagine the spiritual excitement created by two people who pass dimly through the narrative, spoken of by others but not speaking themselves. I have, I fear, delayed too long the writing of this, for as I grow old, the moon of fantasy begins to set confusedly with me. The Avatar has not the spiritual gaiety I desired for it. The friends with whom I once spoke of such things are dead or gone, far from me. If they were with me out of dream, vision, and intuition shared between us, I might have made the narrative to glow. As it is, I have only been able to light my way with my own flickering lantern. A.E. Chapter 1. In the winter twilight, a young man was flying from civilization. His way lay between many snow-covered hills. Why was he flying from city to mountain? On the morning of that wintry day his city had appeared to him to be an evil wrought by sorcerers who, at the close of their labors, had summoned fog, gloom, and cold, a gray consistency, to intervene between the heart and heaven. He had watched from his window dejected figures looming and vanishing in the fog, their world a blur of gray mist above, a blur of murky brown underfoot. He had thought for an instant a picture might be made of these sad shadows darkling and fading in the cloudy air, but shrank from the idea of giving permanence to what was not itself desirable life. A wind had swept the fog from the street, but the thinning mist revealed only the dull darkness of the houses opposite in bleak unlikeness to the city the artist's imagination would build on earth. It must be sorcery keeps the world as it is, he had thought, and fancy had created a vivid grotesque, a council of wizards riding high on the steely air, monstrous shapes with eyes opaque as stone, like to that fabled Balor of the evil eye, but petrifying hearts, not bodies, were the glance. If not like these in body, like these in soul must have been the creators of that dark industrial architecture which made a gloom in the air. He thought of the mines, darkened in those mills, face and form losing comeliness, the mechanical eliminating use of the joyous creative faculty. He had himself been manacled to the mechanical world when a boy. He recalled his agony at the dimming of imaginative life in dull labors, an agony which one day grew unendurable and impelled him there and then to escape, prepared to let body starve rather than soul. The exultation of revolt carried him far from the city, a vagabond truly, but happy, restored to the everlasting companions, air and light, who flung their arms about him. He had journeyed on and on over an earth rich with lakes and woods, with noons misty with light, and mountains that in the evening seemed to ascend in flame. They were all calling him to be of their brotherhood. It was then he first felt their beauty was transparent. Some being, remote yet intimate, peered at him from the deeps of air. The apparitions of light, cloud, mountain, and wood underwent a transfiguration into life, a vaster, remoter self, or oversoul to his own being. So, spell-stricken, he had passed from wonder to wonder until at last the western sea stayed his travelling. There he met Michael Conaire, who became to him an elder brother, and by his help Paul came to be the artist which was nature's intent for him. The thought of that old friend had come to him in his despondency, as light draws the lost traveler in some midnight valley, with an impetuous obedience to impulse in which he had never failed. He had hastened to pack up the materials of his art In his hurrying mind the air was shining, the foam was leaping, the snow was pure on mountain and field, the fire was on the hearth, and the whimsical elder was beside it, all that would meet him at the end of his journey. So he started on his second flight from civilization. An hour after, the dull city and its melancholy slaves were behind him. He wondered if time would ever come when they would revolt as he had done, return to nature, and let that mother restore their lost likeness in soul and body to the ancestral beauty. Only a god, he thought, could arouse them from their stupor. As he drew nigh at twilight to that western land he loved, half in a dream he watched from the silently running car the fields white without a gleam, the hills a chilly violet against a sky of lemon light, the cottages on the hillside, tall smoke rising up through stillest air, here and there a glint of gold from door or window. It was all so pure and cold and lovely that he closed his eyes to lay it reverently in the chamber of beautiful memories. Then his mood of half-dream became wholly dream, and passed into trance, and vision came strangely to him with power and the sense of purpose. In that illumination of vision he was brought to a cottage on some mountainside, he knew not where. He saw by a light in himself which made the dusk lucid, the snow pale as pearl, lying on rock and ridge and roof, with a blue lustre taken from a sky with just awakening stars. One window only was aglow, piercing the whitewashed walls, and about that homestead a delicate nimbus was spread as if rayed from a lovely life hidden within. Above the cottage rose two watchers, crested with many-colored lights, gigantic forms that seemed shaped from some burnished and exquisite fire. They held swords of wavering flame as if guardians of some precious thing. There was gentleness amid the awe the visions created, and it was all marvelously clear, clearer than anything imagination had ever beheld, and beyond his own imagination, beautiful. Paul opened his eyes, and, starting up, he looked wildly about him, but he could see nothing but the dark ridged mountains rising on either side of the valley road. The only lights were the stars and the far lights of homes on the hillside, and he knew not where to search for that cottage of wonder. He sank back, closing his eyes that he might see again, but the vision had vanished, and memory could not recreate it in its first magical luster. He groaned in himself that she should have started up and had lost maybe some further revelation. The car ran on along the snowy road, the driver unconscious of the mad imaginations of his silent passenger, hurrying him from that valley of vision. At last there came a twist in the road, and then the shadowy shining of a lake below battlements of rock, and beyond that dim sea, and beyond that still dimmer mountains. Paul recalled his thoughts from their wild careering as the car turned into an avenue. In a moment he was before an open door. There was a hall ruddy with light, and a figure with arms uplifted in welcome. Chapter 2. Dear Paul, I felt at midday you were coming. You sent your thought flying before you. I have been looking along the road for an hour or more. Behind Conaire was his wife, kind as himself, the silent and affectionate listener to interminable rhapsody and speculation from the talkative philosopher. Conaire was radiant in the anticipation of a less silent hearer. He foresaw colloquies stretching beyond midnight with the artist he had fostered. That night truly he was stirred as Paul hesitatingly told of the vision in the dark valley. Conaire sat up quivering with excitement. "There is a prologue in heaven to that," he began impressively. "I know now why I met you 7 years ago. I know why you revolted against the mechanical. I know why you and I are what we are. I know why Lavelle fashioned poetry out of legend and colored it with fairy. I know why Brion turned to a language which had become almost a tradition, and why the enthusiasts of a rural civilization began their labors. They were all forerunners. Now there will be spiritual adventures, knights errant, dragons to be slain, black magic and divine enchantments. I would not now exchange this, my age, for any other, not to sit at the banquet and hear the wisdom of Socrates, not to be in Babylon with the great king, not to see Solomon bewitch the Queen of Sheba. Incurable romantic, tell me about the prologue in heaven, said Paul, amused and pleased, as all are when thoughts of theirs are taken by another, and the psychic juggler tosses it in the air, and it breaks out into many shining forms with faces looking in every direction. It was to warm himself at this glow of fancy he had fled from the city. I came here to have my gloom lit by the torch of your mind. Begin in heaven, dear friend, and you can descend by way of the half-gods to the hearth where I sit. Make the journey as long as you like. I am excited about that aureoled cottage with its watchers. I never dreamed Earth had such fiery, gigantic citizens. My being leaped up in light when I saw them. Do you think it more than imagination? It is not imagination, it is seership. Listen, Paul, when I was young, the whole world was at war, as you know. You could not remember the agony, but you know the black night which settled on men's souls after it. I thought the Iron Age was to be with us forever, that beauty was to be but a memory, that earth deserted by the gods was to spin desolate in space. You know what infinite sorrow the heart can feel when we are young. In the midnight of my despair, I too had a vision. My sleep broke into a dazzle of light, and I was raised above myself to be with the immortals. They glimmered star-like about me, each in the image by which they were fabled. They were gazing silently at a ruddy divinity that was waving his hand from the heaven world at the troubled earth. It was Ares, proud, for he had drawn men in millions to act in his greatest drama. The gentler deities held council together. The memory of that tragedy must be obliterated. The curtain of blackness which would fall when it was over must be lifted on a new drama to be enacted, a drama like one of the beautiful plays of antiquity in which gods took part as hero and heroine. Such was the play of Helen, which made men realize that beauty was a divinity. Such was the play of Radha and Krishna, which taught lovers how to evoke god and goddess in each other. Only a deity could undo what a deity had done. So now there must be born on earth divine shepherds to lead men back to ancient happiness and beauty. The immortals, gazing on earth, communed as to where the incarnation would take place. In the old world, the hearts of men were so heavy that they could not be uplifted even by a god. In the new world, the hearts of men were so fierce that not even the power of the immortals could save their avatar if he did not worship the idols men had there set up. There was India, always ready to prostrate itself before a divinity, but India had many avatars, and if a new avatar came, it would still be prostrate and gentle and would not rise up in pride. Then one pointed to a land where lived a perfectly impossible people with whom anything was possible, and when he had pointed it out, all the immortals turned their eyes and looked on me, and I awoke. Your imagination leaps by the tipsiest stepping stones from darkness to light, and with 7-leagued boots, said Paul, contrary from old form, yet all the while willing to be convinced life's darkness could be transmuted into precious fires. But if you took any two dreams by any two people and made them stepping stones for your 7-leagued imagination, into what incredible regions in space and time would you not be carried? There are not stepping stones only, but by treading on these I can see the stepping stones behind me and others ahead, Cornair answered, delighted at an opposition which was a signal to summon up whole legions of theory. My vision doubtless appeals to you more personal fantasy than an image of truth, but truth may be revealed in symbol. When we fall asleep after a day of anxiety, our desires often dramatize themselves in dream, which is a true symbol of our waking state. The circumstance of the dream may be incredible. What it symbolizes is a truth. In the secrecy of sleep, in that state we call dreamless, we wake to a life of divine reality. When we emerge from that state, its realities may dramatize themselves in symbolic dreams, and these realities may drape themselves in whatever shapes they can find. The circumstance of the dream may be incredible, and yet the idea symbolized may be worthy of philosophic scrutiny. I know, continued Cornair with a deprecating movement of hands and features, my mind is encrusted with fantasies. I built them up as a defense against the gray folk who were ever assailing me with the wish that I become as colorless as themselves. For that habit of mind, the penalty is I receive truth only through a mist of fantasy. But I have come to believe my dream, however fantastic, mirrored some reality in divine consciousness, brooding on the future, devising religions, philosophies, arts, sciences, civilizations, and breathing forth the moods by which acceptance is made possible. I think your vision was of some reality, while mine was symbolic. You must not think of gods or avatars as fountains only of theological piety. In the ancient world, any around whom nations pivoted to new destinies were regarded as avatars. So the goddess was surmised in Helen, the god in Alexander or Cuchulainn. You must not allow your mind to be dominated by traditions of the avatars of theology. Plato says, if there be any gods, they certainly do not philosophize, and I am equally certain they are not like even the saintliest of archbishops. They are, I fancy, more like poets who live their own lordly imaginations. It is not an incredible speculation that one of these divine poets has taken a body in this world and is now as child or man in that aureoled cottage on the mountainside. Are not the greater poets half gods? And why should we shrink from belief in one who is fully conscious of his divinity? I would undertake labors like those of Hercules to learn the truth about my dream, cried Paul. But what have the gods been doing since the council in heaven? Tell me about their forerunners. You have a segment of the divine circle, and I expect an imagination like yours to complete the full orb for me. It is not as easy as that, returned the philosopher. An ancient scripture says, the wise ones guard well the home of nature's order. They assume excellent forms in secret. Whatever happens, I am sure will be surprising, however we speculate. Ares is the only deity who repeats himself. The warrior mind in heaven, as on earth, is devoid of imagination. Was there ever clearer evidence of flagging invention than in the Russian Revolution following the French? The dramatis personae were the same in both dramas. A half-witted king, a haughty queen, angry philosophers, magicians, charlatans, ferocious dictators, jacquerie, and peasant wars. But it is a fascinating subject for speculation how, after thought in heaven on the affairs of earth, the divine will might be transmuted into earthly activities. The ancients spoke of fountains welling out of Hecate, by which symbols they expressed their beliefs that from the heart of divine nature there was a ceased flow of spiritual energy on all that live. In many lands there are legends of these sidereal fountains. In our own country also, it was by breathing the exhalation from mystic nature the Sibyls were inspired to prophecy. This indicated the belief of the ancients that ideas born in the heaven world descended to the earth dwellers by these ethereal streams. We can imagine one of these fountains feeding with spiritual vitality the people among whom the incarnation is to take place, first colored by the presence of the god and the spiritual sensitive awakened to a new consciousness by the current, lathing heart and mind. stirred to give it expression, and so becoming forerunners of the avatar. These naturally would seek symbols and affinities in myth, legend, and tradition of ages when this commerce between heaven and earth was understood. What is spoken of as the mystic paganism of our poets is not merely a protest against mechanical life, but is the desire of the soul to live amid its spiritual affinities. The very names they use, the names of ancient gods and heroes, have a power of evocation. Those who, allured by the magic of rhythm, murmur these names, whether they know it or not, are weaving spells and incantations. The powers evoked flow to them out of the ever-living. The earth is changed for them. And all this prepares the way for the avatar, for if there were no forerunners, there would be none who could understand his voice. The forerunners arouse ideas latent in the character of the people. The avatar wakens these to full consciousness and indicates their final goal. The purpose of an avatar is to reveal the spiritual character of a race to itself. Can you say of us that we do not know our own spiritual character? Asked Paul. Do you know when you listen to orchestra what next shall follow on the music sounding on the air, whether flute or violin shall most intoxicate the sense? But whatever instrument dominates, if the work be by a great master, we feel the sequence was inevitable, even if unforeseen. The master knows the quality of the instrument and its full tone. We do not know until the master has played on the instrument what music it can make. We do not know ourselves, but we are known. The spiritual cultures we associate with Greece, Egypt, India, Persia, China, or Judea were all in the divine consciousness before they were in the human. I can imagine before the awakening of Greece, before a poet had sung to a lyre, or a statue was carved, the lords of the world, who know what it is within, perceiving the latent instinct for beauty, and that some divine messenger incarnate to be its avatar. It may have been that being, fabled long after as Apollo, by whom was awakened that consciousness which culminated in epic, drama, statue, temple, and which realized its divine origin in a philosophy which declared that deity was beauty in its very essence. Can we say of our own people what one mood is dominant, as we can say in ancient Greece that there was a passion for beauty, or in ancient India there was the longing for spiritual truth? But, said Paul, you came out of that high conclave with the thought we were an impossible people. Why, if that be so, should everything be possible? The marriage of heaven and earth has not taken place here, as among the races I have mentioned, returned the philosopher placidly. Where it has taken place, men can live by reason. We have not that rational life. We live by intuition or instinct. At times our life is golden, at other times we are like demons from Eblis. I am in a mood to believe anything tonight, said Paul. He moved about the room restless as the orange glow dancing and dwindling on the wall, an echo in light of the ruddy hearth. Then he went to the window and looked out on a mountainous earth, all blue, fairy, and still in its masks of snow. It seemed more imagination than reality. The sky leaning over the lofty crags was like a face all majesty of expression, yet without features. The sense of it being living overcame him. It seemed to draw nearer and nearer, to be at the window, intense with spirit being. The window, for an instant, was a portal into eternity. He came back to Conaire. I do not understand myself. I know nothing about life. This morning I felt as if iron bars were to close about us forever, and I hurried here like the condemned escaping from a dungeon. Tonight I feel as if I had but to lift my hands and call, "Be ye lifted up, ye everlasting doors," and that apparition of earth and sky would be rolled up as a curtain. But, he said dejectedly, they would not be lifted up. We are only children, tilting at unassailable walls. It is in the wakening of an eye the dead shall be raised, said Conaire. Was it With those eyes you saw the fiery watchers on the hillside? I think you are a natural seer, but you have been content as an artist with the images you created for yourself. An Eastern sage said we could climb into heaven by brooding on knowledge which came in a dream. If you could brood on your vision, it may start you on some marvelous traveling. Remember the Persian poet. A single aleph were the clue, could we but find it, to the treasure house, and peradventure to the master too. Chapter 3. A mood at once gay and solemn is born in the soul when it first discovers a path to light out of the dark cavern of the body, and is made aware of wide realms to travel in with a higher order of beings as companions. Such a mood overwhelmed Paul when he laid his head on a pillow and closed his eyes to sleep. He found not the accustomed shade into which consciousness fades, but a jewel luster, as if whatever being had imparted to him its own vision by that momentary commerce with him had made everything radiant, leaving behind it shining memories of its own nature and its travel from heaven to earth. In that mood of mingled awe and exultation, Paul pursued the trail of glittering images. He seemed to himself to be borne up on a river of luminous and living air, to be carried in vision into the heart of a great mountain. When he had passed within, there was no hill, but a dazzle of light cast up from some interior fountain. He was aware of lofty beings there, kinsmen of those fiery watchers who kept guard on the mountain ridges. He did not feel anything was strange, for he seemed to have some ancient knowledge of it all. There was a spirit in him, too, deeper than conscious thought, which knew of a vaster life beyond all vision. He would have drawn nigher those lordly ones, but there was some constraint on him which he could not break, and at last there came relaxing of the will, and he slept. It may have been that spirit within him desired to part from the waking self before it passed through the gateway of light to high adventures of its own. However it may have been, when Paul awoke he felt inexpressibly young and happy, as if he had been reborn and baptized with some glorious fire. His limbs were light to move, and his fancies like a gay multitude of fish, flying to and fro, sunlit in water. He dressed and went out, climbing the snow-covered ridge that rose behind the house, so that his eyes might drink in all that his heart loved. The world without, like his world within, was all radiance in the dawn. The sea was a waste of quivering light, the lake was frozen silver. In the mountainous lands the heights were glittering with gold, and the hollows blue, lustrous and ethereal as the abyss of air overhead. Here and there was a starry sparkling as of diamonds and opals scattering in the light. Here and there were patches of dark gray or purple or green rock, vestiges of the rugged country he knew before, but now veiled by the purity and frailty of snow. He breathed with delight the clear, cold, life-giving air. Every atom in his being was fiery. Never did he feel charged with so intense a vitality. He interpreted the universe by his own being, and had the sense of life throughout dense infinitudes. He lifted up his hands, crying out as one spirit to another, as if he knew in those wide spaces there was that which could hear him and could answer to his call. Then he heard a shout and saw a ruddy little figure, Cornaire's only child, flying to him over the snow. She flung herself on the young artist whom she loved. Paul lifted the girl in his arms, and talking gaily to her, went back to the house. Chapter 4. What was told of that mystic Babylon of the Apocalypse, the haunt of every unclean spirit, might have been spoken of the cities of the Iron Age, dominated by the dark mechanic genius. They were haunted by yet more evil divinities, and knew it not. The stars were not darkened over them, the sun shone on their streets, the clouds were snowy and spiritual as of old. All the tapestry of the heavenly house hung and flamed overhead, but there was midnight about them in anima mundi. In vain was the wealth created, bartered for beauty. It could not purchase a light by which the soul could see it, and because of that psychic night, what was lovely to the eyes could not make gay the soul. As there were houses haunted by the shades of those who in them have done evil, so were the cities haunted by evil memories. The shades grew thicker about them through centuries as the ocean of life bathing them became more impregnated by the emanations of men leprous with sensuality, blind with fear, or smoldering with hate. The larvae of the dead hung about the living with unsatiated passion. And a base desire was never solitary, for it summoned up legions of evil affinities to urge it to its consummation. As the lights of the soul became extinguished, its darkened halls and corridors were thronged by sinister inhabitants breathing animalism and corruption. They held revelry within, and hence came frenzies, obsessions, and unappeasable desires. The body possessed by the shades was made meat for its inhabitants. The character of the goat, the hog, and the rat began to appear in men's faces and to efface the divine signature. In the Babylons of the ancient earth there was beauty and magnificence, even of sin. Beauty was born in their courts and byways because mechanical devices had not yet been set to do the work of man. The imagination was still artificer, and the slave might hold converse with heaven and be a creator at its labors. But as the demon of the mechanical began to dominate the cities of the Iron Age, it brought life itself into subservience to it. The looms of the soul became silent, and rich webs of fantasy no longer poured from them. The potter no longer shaped his vessel with delight, molding about it the dancing figures which were in his heart. No song sounded over labor, for the machine chanted its iron dronings by day and by night, and the sorcery made men to forget the soul had once been as illuminated as nature. The heart was ever heavy, and few were those who could hold back the gloom by creating their own light. The imagination could no more conceive of lordly life, and multitudes fell blindly into a mold devised that society might have the precision of the machine. The artificers of this vast degradation wrought on the unillumined nature, so that if any had the dream of freedom, they were made to seem the enemies of all by which men lived. By identity of character, souls became welded together in the psychic world, and tend there to become entities, beings made out of multitudes, the dominant passion, as soul moving all to act together as a single being. To the divine vision, these cities of the Iron Age appeared as monstrous beasts, the dragon devourers of virgin life. Unable themselves to give birth to vital beings, they became insatiable vampires, drawing youth out of nature to themselves to replace the life which became so rapidly burnt out, so decadent and decrepit, that none could trace ancestry beyond a grandsire who had been born in the cities. As the cities, exercising this magnetic power, grew more thronged, the country became more desolate and deserted. The earth itself, for leagues about them, suffered a blight so that there was less magic in woodland or glade. These seemed empty of their elemental populace, dryad and hamadryad, the gentle silvery presences blowing their horns or making with childlike voices melodies with no passion or pain in them. Or else the power to see and hear these had been lost, and a world of ethereal beauty had drifted beyond human cognizance. It was in one of the blackest of these cities Paul had heard a voice like that which cried in the mythic Babylon, "Come out of her, my people," and had fled away from it to hear the voice of the earth spirit, to listen to its multitudinous meditation, and to be inspired to become one of its instruments, so that the spirit might not pass forgotten from the minds of men. Chapter 5. As a cloud fades, leaving bare the fields of heaven, so the cloud of snow crumbled from rock, hill, and hollow. Summer came, and Paul, still under the enchantment, lingered in the western land. Such moods of majesty and sweetness arose in him that he felt omnipresence was working the same miracles in his soul that it wrought out of earth, turning dark clay into the brilliance of leaf and flower. Nothing that lived close to the earth could altogether escape the wizardry. There was a spirit in the wild people who lived among the hills which was not in the people of the cities. They belonged, however remotely, to some mystic empire. The dullest peasant might break silence with a phrase in which the mountains seemed to speak rather than a man. Even in their orgies there was a leaven of imagination, and a spiritual light glowed, however fitfully, amid the bestial, as a star might glow in the darkness of a tarn. Daily Paul was discovering the affinity between these people, himself, and that mystic nature. In a late twilight he sat on a rock above a mountain road. From that twilight nigh the earth the night rose up from one blue heaven to another, and he stayed gazing through the night until his soul became one with the stillness, prolonging his reverie until it seemed to become part of the reverie of earth itself, or to take color from its imaginations. An incoherent babbling broke the silence. It came from a man staggering along the road below. That drunken babble outraged the solemn ceremonial whereby the lights nightly unveil the infinitude which is the symbol of God, and the ivory gate seemed to close at the sound. Then there was again silence, and Paul, peering through the dusk, saw the drunkard had fallen in the middle of the road. He clambered down from his seat on the rocks, and as he bent to lift the fallen man out of the danger from any cart which might pass in the darkness, he heard a half inarticulate crooning, and caught the words of an old song full of gentleness and beauty. She passed the Sally garden on little snow-white feet, and Paul knew that, through the fever and blind disorder of the reeling senses, the soul of that man was following images which were quiet and lovely, and it too belonged to the mystic empire. Paul had brooded on that rocky ridge night after night, for he was painting the mountain which rose beyond the wooded valley and the long lake, and he carried memory of a shadowy form and dim illumination to the hours of light when he could work. One morning he brought his picture to the rocky seat to compare the forms revealed by day with his memory of them shrouded in the summer night. As he brooded on the picture, he felt a quickening of his imagination. He closed his eyes, and he saw again the huge mountain in the dim night, but now a light glowed above the high plateau, and wavering flames streamed up in the air. His fingers began to quiver as if what he had imagined had run from head to hand. And he took those brushes and began to paint that mystic light above the high land. He was inspired by something beyond himself. The hand moved almost without guidance from the mind. Yet when he had ended, the psychic illumination on the mountain did not appear alien to earth, but a portion of natural beauty. "What is that light on the hill?" asked an eager and imperative voice. Paul turned. He had never seen a more beautiful boy than this who stood before him. The sunlight through the yellow curls made them glow like an aura of fire. The eyes, strange, innocent, and intense, were like pools of blue light in the shadowed face. Paul's own eyes remained fixed on the boy, and he could not move them, so stricken was he with that beauty. The child of a peasant, he thought. What a wonder! He might be tending sheep, but no sheep were visible. "I do not know," he answered at last, for the boy's eyes dazzled him, and his mind was confused as the mind is ofttimes by the eyes of women. "I imagined it there. It might be a palace of the Siddha, who were the old gods of our people. You may have heard of them." "Old people speak of them," said the boy. "I have not seen them, though they call me a changeling." "Why do they call you that?" asked Paul. "I will not do the things they wish me to do. I will not be made to learn like the others. I will not be shut out of the air. I run away. Do you not want to know what others know? Asked Paul. I know what they think, answered the boy. They have no light in their minds. Unless I blow it into them, then I can make them think what I will. What do you make them do? Asked Paul, amused at the young dictator whose years might number 12 or 14. He thought the boy might indeed move people to do anything by his beauty. I imagine them wearing gay colors, and they begin to wear them. I imagine them dancing in curves like the clouds, and they begin to dance, said the boy. Paul, who was now in imagination devising a picture of the lad as a shepherd on the hills, and who wished to know where he could find him again, asked, What is your name? Aud, said the boy. I have not seen you before. Where do you live? The boy waved a hand to a ridge made faint and blue by many miles of air and heat and light. There, he said, it was to see the sea I came here. So far, said Paul. How tired you must be. The boy laughed, and before Paul could find words to delay him, he ran up the hill as lightly as another might run down. Paul saw the golden curls in a last flashing against the blue sky as the light figure leaped over the ridge of rock. I am sure to meet him again, he thought, but many years were to pass before he again saw Aud.